Start with number 10, Madagascar. Located 400 kilometers off the coast of East Africa, Madagascar is the fourth largest island in the world, known for its astonishing wildlife. The flourishing tourism industry has not been able to lift the country out of poverty. The majority of the population is still dependent upon agriculture for their livelihoods, leaving the country's economy especially vulnerable to weather-related disasters. Since becoming independent from France in 1960, Madagascar has experienced bouts of political instability, violence, coups, and disputed elections. Yet, in recent years, Madagascar was finally on an upward trajectory. President André Rajoelina and his predecessor, Hairy Planina, had made poverty reduction and infrastructure development major priorities. Growth was increasing steadily. Structural reforms were underway and foreign investors coming back. Everything changed last year. COVID-19, the World Bank stated, has triggered a sharp recession, hitting especially hard the population employed in tourism and in the manufacturing sector. What worse, the outbreak also depleted the availability of fiscal resources for priority investments and social programs, putting on hold the goal of achieving more inclusive growth. Yet in recent years, at least for a little while, Madagascar appeared on slightly upward trajectory. Growth was increasingly steadily, foreign investors were coming back, and poverty reduction and infrastructure development were declared major priorities by populist President André Rajoelina. But they were just the promises. Mostly, Rajoelina, has critics has proved to be corrupt and ineffective, although he recently sacked all his ministers, blaming them for the very same reasons. The pandemic triggered a sharp recession, hitting especially hard the population employed in tourism and in the manufacturing sector. What is worse, the outbreak also depleted the availability of fiscal resources for priority investment and social programs. Rajoelina's top strategy to fight COVID and overcome its social and economic repercussions, promoting COVID organics, a locally produced herbal beverage that her claims can prevent and cure coronavirus. Number 9. Liberia. Africa's oldest republic has also ranked amongst the poorest nations for the longest time. While the country has enjoyed peace and stability since the ending of the Civil War in 2003, its governments failed to adequately address serious systemic problems and structural challenges. To add to the difficulties, this country of about 5 million has greatly suffered from the decline in commodity prices and the major Ebola epidemic that hit West Africa in 2014. Expectations were high when the former football star George Weah became president in 2018. His term was instead marred by high inflation and unemployment and negative economic growth. Although a moderate recovery is now projected, COVID-19 is bound to cast a long shadow on the nation's prospects. Things, however, might be falling into place in the last. Liberia's economy grew by 3.5% in 2021 and is projected to expand by 4.7% in 2022. Number 8. Malawi. One of Africa's smallest nations, in recent years, Malawi has made strides in improving economic growth and implementing crucial structural reforms. Nevertheless, poverty is still whispered, and a nation economy largely dependent upon rain-fed crops remains vulnerable to weather-related shocks. As a result, while living standards in urban areas are broadly improving, food insecurity in rural parts is extremely high. Malawi is a generally peaceful country that has had a stable government since gaining independence from Britain in 1964. However, disputed poll results are far from being an anomaly. In 2020, the country's constitutional court annulled former President Peter Mutharika's poll win in the previous year's general elections, citing vote tampering. Theologian and politician Lazarus Chakwera, who was sworn in his place, declared that he wanted to provide the kind of leadership that makes everybody prosper. The pandemic put that plan on hold last year. The country's GDP dropped to 0.6% from 4.5% a year earlier. Number 7. Nigeria. With 80% of its landlocked territory covered by the Sahara Desert and rapidly growing population largely dependent upon small-scale agriculture, Niger is under threat from desertification and climate change. Food insecurity is high, as are disease and mortality rates, and the army has recurrent clashes with jihadist group and Islamic State affiliate Boko Haram have displaced thousands of people. One of the main drivers of the economy, the extraction of valuable natural resources such as gold and uranium, has also suffered from volatility and low commodity prices. Number 6. Mozambique. The former Portuguese colony has plenty of arable land and water, and ample energy and mineral resources. Mozambique is also strategically located as 4 of the 6 countries in borders are landlocked and depend on it as a conduit to global trade, and over the past decade has often posted average GDP growth rates of more than 7%, yet it remains among the top 10 poorest countries in the world, with the large sectors of the population continuing to live well below the poverty line. While a 15-year-old civil war ended in 1992, severe climate conditions, corruption, and political instability never went away. To make things worse, since 2017 attack carried out by the Islamic insurgent groups have blocked the gas-rich northern part of the country. Up to 4,000 people were killed and another 800,000 displaced. Number 5. Democratic Republic of the Congo. Since gaining independence from Belgium in 1960, the Congo has suffered decades of repressive dictatorship, political instability, and constant violence. The country turned a page in 2019 when Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, the son of legendary opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi, was elected as the new president. The task has faces are daunting. His controversial predecessor, Joseph Kabila, who had governed since succeeding his assassinated father in 2001, is credited for bringing an end to what is commonly referred to as the Great African War, a conflict that claimed up to 6 million lives, either as a direct result of fighting or because of disease and malnutrition. However, he did little to improve the lives of people who survived the war. Over 60% of country, 92 million population still live on less than $2 a day. On the contrary, a recent leak of financial documents shows how, while in power, he used a private bank to embezzle about $138 million of public funds. Meanwhile, roughly 60% of the country's 92 million population is still living on less than $2 a day. Number 4. Central African Republic. Rich in gold, oil, uranium, and diamonds, the Central African Republic is a very wealthy country inhabited by very poor people. However, after claiming the title of the poorest in the world for the best part of a decade, this nation of just 4.8 million is showing some signs of progress. For the first time since its independence from France in 1960, in 2016 the Central African Republic has democratically elected a president. Former mathematics professor and Prime Minister Faustin Archange Touadéra, who campaigned as a peacemaker who could bridge the divide between the Muslim minority and the Christian majority. Yet, while his successful election has been seen as an important step towards national reconstruction, large swaths of the country remain controlled by anti-government and military groups. When last December, Todera won a second term, rebel forces backed by the former dictator Francois Bozize sought to retake control of the country. Despite these problems and incidents in recent years, growth has somewhat picked up, driven by the timber industry and a revival of both agricultural and mining sectors. The economy is all benefiting from the partially resumed sale of diamonds, which were found to be funding interreligious armed groups and placed under an international embargo in 2013. Yet, the government has struggled to restore sales and has seen only a fraction of the revenues in one state, and roughly 60% of the population still live below the poverty line. To make matters worse, lockdowns and other measures taken by the government to limit the spread of coronavirus forced many families to stay home, leaving them unable to earn an income. Number 3. Somalia. 3 decades of internal violence and conflict, frequent droughts and floods followed by food insecurity and displacement of people, lack of access to health services coupled with the rapid spread of communicable diseases, massive levels of unemployment among especially young people, Somalis are growing hopeless. This country of 16 million in the Horn of Africa never seemed to catch a break. A projected GDP growth of over 3% in 2020 was interrupted by the compounded effect of the coronavirus pandemic and infestation of locusts. Unprecedented in modern times, intensified floods, which caused the economy to contract by 1.5%. Yet, the World Bank says Somalia could have a brighter future. Rapid urbanization, growing use of digital technologies, planned investments in sectors such as energy, ports, education, and health can support economic growth and job creation. Atenono's recovery is already underway, and the government has pledged its commitment to charting a course towards better and resilient growth. About that government, in April this year, Somalia's parliament voted to extend President Abdullahi Mohamed four-year term, which had expired 2 months earlier, for a further 2 years. The power grab triggered a political crisis and rival faction clashed in the capital, Mogadishu. Ultimately, Mohamed bowed to the growing opposition and called for a new presidential election. Yet, experts say there is still room for trouble. Number 2. South Sudan. South Sudan is the newest nation in the world. It was born on July 9, 2011, 6 years after the agreement that ended that conflict with Sudan, Africa's longest-running civil war. However, violence has continued to ravage this landlocked state of roughly 11 million. Formed by the 10 southernmost territories of Sudan and home to around 60 indigenous ethnic groups, a new conflict broke out in 2013 when President Salva Kiir accused his former deputy rebel leader Riek Machar of staging a coup. As a result, it is estimated that as many 400,000 people were killed in clashes and nearly 4 million have been internally displaced or fled to neighboring countries. South Sudan could be a very rich nation, but with oil accounting for almost all of its exports, falling commodity prices and rising security-related costs harmed the country's economy. Outside the oil sector, the majority of the population is employed in traditional agriculture, although violence often prevents farmers from planting or harvesting crops. Will the people of South Sudan ever have a real shot at living more prosperous lives? After signing a ceasefire and a power-sharing agreement in 2018, last year government and opposition parties formed a unity cabinet led by the President Kiir and Machar as a first vice president. The accord has proved fragile, yet to a certain extent, it helped in reducing politically motivated conflicts. It has been least effective in countering the pandemic-related oil price shock and the effects of the most severe series of floods the country has experienced in 60 years. Since last summer, they have killed livestock, destroyed crops, and displaced thousands of families. Number 1. Burundi. The small landlocked country of Burundi, scarred by Hutu-Tutsi ethnic conflict and civil war, has the rather unenviable distinction of topping the world poverty ranking, with about 90% of its nearly 12 million citizens relying on subsistence agriculture, and the overwhelming majority of them living on $1.25 a day or less. Food scarcity is a major concern. The level of food insecurity is almost twice as high as the average for sub-Saharan African countries. Furthermore, access to water and sanitation remains very low, and less than 5% of the population has electricity. All these problems, needless to say, have been exacerbated by the pandemic. How have things come to this despite the civil war formally ending 15 years ago? Lack of infrastructure, endemic corruption, security concerns. The ingredients leading to extreme poverty are often the usual suspects. Pierre Nkurunziza, the charismatic former Hutu rebel turned president in 2005, had initially managed to unite the country behind him and to start rebuilding the economy. In 2015, however, the announcement that we would run for a third term, which according to the opposition was in violation of the constitution, reunited all disputes. A failed coup attempt followed. Hundreds of people died in clashes and tens of thousands were displaced initially on abroad. Nkurunziza died in summer of 2020 at age 55. The official cause of death was cardiac arrest, although it is widely suspected the real cause was COVID-19. Evariste Ndayishimiye, an ex-general who was handpicked by Nkurunziza to succeed him at the end of his mandate, was sworn days later. So far, his record has been mixed. While like his predecessor, he has downplayed the severity of the virus, and reports of human rights violations continue to emerge from the country. He made an effort to relaunch the economy and repair diplomatic relationship with his African neighbors, and especially by the West. His efforts paid off. Both the US and the European Union have recently lifted the financial sanctions put in place following the 2015 political crisis and resumed aid to Burundi. Could this be a turning point for the poorest nation in the world?